It's time for Health Futures with Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. And if you're just tuning in, we are a show about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. We come at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park, Money Radio Studios, and we are doing that here live today, Friday, November 23rd. And if you're also new to our show, you know our show is not about me. It's about the extraordinary guests I bring to the show, and today is no different. Today, I've got Dr. Greg Sanders here on the show. He's a cardiologist, and he also is the founder and CEO of this really incredible, innovative company called Hybrid Chart. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for having me.
I think in my 5 years of doing the show, I don't think I've ever had a cardiologist here on the show with me, so it's really exciting to have you here on the show, and really, I know we want to talk about Hybrid Chart, but cardiology is fascinating to me. It's kind of the heart of, no pun intended, of the body, and really makes our bodies work.
Absolutely. Now, I was gravitated towards cardiology early on, mostly because it's one of those unique specialties where you can really make a huge impact on a patient's life very quickly. So I like that, plus I liked all of the basic science behind it, and I can bring in physics, I can bring in all sorts of things. So I have a huge practice. I've been here for 16 years or so, and it's been a very rewarding career for me.
And you could have gone a lot of directions when you went to med school.
Oh, yeah.
And cardiology is it. And it is amazing because there are lots of people we know walking the streets every day that have maybe heart challenges, and thanks to modern medicine, they can have procedures, or they can take medication. They can do things to function in a way that maybe in the past they were not able to.
Exactly. The technology is advancing greatly. I mean, we years ago, and it's not that many years ago, a lot of the heart surgeries were open heart surgeries with a big scar in the middle of your chest, and now those have been replaced with what are called percutaneous operations, where you can actually go in through the leg and you can put in new valves and you can do all sorts of things. And you'd think this is stuff that would only come many, many years from now, and it's all here right now.
That is incredible. And our listening audience had a chance to meet my dad a couple weeks ago. I had him here on the show with Lynn Sue Cooney, who used to be an anchor over at 12 News, and who is the Director of Community Engagement for Hospice of the Valley.
Oh, great.
And having Dad here on the show was really special to me because I lost my mom over 16 years ago, and really the genesis of not only this show, but my business that I'm in, Cypress HomeCare, came from the fact that I was a caregiver for my mom. But having Dad around is very special, and Dad, a week from yesterday, is having... on the 29th, is having a TAVR procedure.
Right.
And you just talked about doing stuff through the vein. What does TAVR mean?
So the TAVR is a newer procedure where, and the TAVR stands for transaortic valve replacement. So basically you take a pig valve and you load it onto a balloon. You go through the leg. You go up to right where your old valve is. And everyone always asks, does my old valve stay there? The answer is yes. You inflate the balloon, you crumple the old valve to the side. The pig valve snaps into place, and there's grapple hooks on the edge of it.
Wow.
And under high pressure, you kind of wedge it in there, and voila, it's done. So an operation that used to take 4 hours, you were in the hospital a week minimum, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, now takes 45 minutes, and you're in the hospital for a day, maybe two, and then the recovery period is measured in a few days, not weeks.
Fascinating. And they used to crack the chest before.
Absolutely.
To be able to do that.
Right. So not everyone's a candidate for it. And obviously
Right.
This started out slowly, and it started out in very specific populations, so you don't just do it for everyone. And the traditional valve surgeries, we have a lot of historical data where we can look and see how long do these valves last, and we have probably 30 years plus of data, and these TAVRs we think they're effective, and we're probably a little over 10 years of data now.
Nice.
But I think it's the wave of the future.
And it's interesting because they're using a pig valve, probably baboon valves too, right? Or is it just pig?
It's usually just pig.
Just pig.
Yeah.
Versus, I have a friend of mine that 20 years ago had a mechanical valve put in. And the reason why he had a mechanical valve was he was in his 40s. And I guess pig valves have to get changed out every 10 years or 20 years?
Some of them last 15 to 20. We don't always know. And then the big question became, well, if I put in this pig valve and in 15 years from now I need another one, can you do a TAVR inside a TAVR? And the answer is absolutely. We've done that.
Well, God willing, my dad, who's going to be 83 in a couple months, lives 15 years and is in good enough shape to maybe have another one done should he need it.
I hope he does well.
Well, thank you. And I wanted just to get a chance to talk to a cardiologist, and you're not my father's cardiologist, but you know a lot about TAVR, so I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to talk about it, and our listening audience got a chance to meet my dad a couple weeks ago.
That's great.
So God willing, he gets through this, and thank you for sharing that with me.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about this hybrid chart.
Sure.
And, the origin of the hybrid chart. And when you really sit down and you think about it, how did this all emerge? And how did this come to be? I mean, you're a cardiologist, and, you also are an innovator. And obviously you saw something that might have been broken, might have needed some perfection. So that was really the genesis of this, and I would love for you to take our listening audience through this.
So, I'll give you the shorter version because it's only an hour show. So, a lot of this stems with my specific experiences. So I have a background in computers, in development, and it eventually led to database development, network development, which started when I was a kid, like 13, 14 years old.
Wow.
Before any of this stuff even existed. The short story is my dad brought home an Apple IIe. He wanted to use it for his business. He played with it for a week. This is back when there were no software companies. This is like 1982. And he very quickly threw it on the ground and kicked it. And then I walked over and said, hey, can I try? So I taught myself computer programming, basically.
Wow.
Built my dad. It took me a year. I built him an inventory management system. And then before he knew it.
How old were you then?
14, somewhere around there. And then, a lot of his suppliers said, wow, Steve, where'd you get this? Where'd you get all this? Because, it was pretty expansive. And he said, oh, my son built it for me. They said, well, would he build it for me? So before I knew it, I was like 16, and I kind of had a software company. So then I went to med school. And then I remember I was like third year med school. I was in the OR. I was holding a retractor like every third year medical student is supposed to do. And some nurse walked in and said, we got a guy on the phone saying something's crashing. And at that moment, I knew I couldn't have both. So I sold it off, went to med school. Everywhere I went, I look at myself as probably a process improvement analyst. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of obsessed with process. And I don't believe that computers can fix every problem. Sometimes they make problems worse. We've seen that in medicine. That's foreshadowing. But we've seen that. And so... But throughout my medical career, through my training, residency, fellowship, I would always use my computer skills to try to solve some real-world problems. So, I built the largest echo database in the world at Harvard using with their team. I converted old data to modern data and built a tool to search it. And
wow.
So things like that.
I did not know that. That's really cool.
Right. So then I moved in 2002 to Phoenix, and I'm all excited. I joined a private practice with 10 other people covering about 5 hospitals. And I start rounding. I start doing all the things a practicing cardiologist should do. And I recognized very quickly that things were massively broken. And so I set out to try to fix it. And that's kind of how Hybrid Chart was born. It was born more as a solution for me, for my current practice, which ultimately led to... hey, this may be something other doctors may want to get their hands on. And so that kind of grew organically. And then I would say for the past 3 years, we've been more of a real business and are in 23 states right now and growing.
23 states.
Yeah.
Wow. And I love the fact that you picked up on this as an opportunity to fill a need that you saw.
Right.
And, one of the things I want to talk about when we come back, and you said that when we were talking about the TAVR, and that is we it's only been around 10 years, and we're still collecting data.
Right.
And, data from a technology standpoint is really king. I mean, and what I'm seeing in the healthcare world, especially with innovation and technology, is data and dumping data and figuring out, and doing more predictive analytics based on certain person's morbidities, their age, their ethnicity, whatever their diagnosis is, to really predict outcomes.
Right.
So really cool stuff that you're doing, Greg.
Well, thank you.
It's hard to believe we're down one segment, and you are getting taken out by, who is this, Wes? A little Eagles? Thank you. Eagles. You're listening to Health Futures Taking Stock in You. I've got Greg Sanders, Dr. Greg Sanders from Hybrid Chart here. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and we are talking Hybrid Chart. If you're just tuning in, I got Dr. Greg Sanders here. He's a cardiologist in town. He's also the founder and CEO of Hybrid Chart, and it's a SaaS. It's a medical software, and it's a software acting as a service. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago what a SaaS was, I couldn't tell you what a SaaS is or was. I do know now. And if you missed our first segment, you can find it up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button up on the top. Third button down, you'll find radio show. And we've got about 230 of them up there because we've been bringing this show to you live from the Scottsdale Airport for the last 5 years. And here we are post-Thanksgiving, Friday, November 23rd, and we are talking about Hybrid Chart. We're talking cardiology. And when we broke from the first segment, we were talking about data and how data is really king. And I think the technology world and innovation world and the medical world are finally coming together and trying to solve a lot of issues. Last week, I talked about Aging 2.0. It was a conference I attended. Some great innovation, some great technologies. These young minds from the Silicon Valley are creating all kinds of ways for older adults to be able to age in place using assistive devices, using sensors, using robotic technology. It's just really cool stuff. And Greg, we were talking about, when we went to break, we were talking about data. And data is what Hybrid Chart's all about.
It definitely is. So, as a population, I think what we're starting to all recognize is that if we want to help take care of people properly, we need data for analytics. We need to be able to self-improve and improve the processes. The challenges we have is that this infrastructure that doctors are practicing in is broken, and it's disjointed. It doesn't talk to each other. Very basic example, in my office, I have a certain electronic health record that's made by one company. I'm rounding in 5 hospitals, and each one of those 5 hospitals could be using different software, and you'd think they would all talk to each other, but they don't. And so the poor patient who's there and their record from the office does not magically appear in the hospital. The doctor that's in the hospital doesn't have always easy access to it. Patient then goes to rehab. The rehab people have no access to any of the data from the hospital or the office. It's basically they're dependent upon what's been given to them. And then, they may go home with some home health, and now the home health people, they are struggling for access. So it's kind of a siloed type of environment where nothing's talking to each other. The other problem is if you look at the modern healthcare records, they are these giant sieves of data. You're pulling in so much information. And if you talk about a doctor who's, let's say, seeing a patient on a Monday, and there's a different doctor seeing that patient on Tuesday, the amount of data that doctor needs to adequately take care of the patient is probably a fraction of the amount of data that's sitting in the electronic health record. And so when you talk about handoffs, not just a handoff from one doctor to another, but a handoff from one facility to another. So if you go from acute care to rehab, it really is very streamed down, filtered data that is going to make an impact. And it's hard to pull that out because usually what comes across is a big, huge jumble of mess.
Right. Right. And that's what you're trying to solve with Hybrid Chart.
Right. So, I mean, I recognized the disconnection early on. I also recognized, it's funny, doctors are so eager to jump onto technology. We were talking about TAVRs before, and here's this new fancy gadget that you can use, and doctors are first in line for that kind of stuff. And then when you talk about operational inefficiencies and ways to improve their whole workflow, they're not interested. They're scared. They're very apprehensive about disrupting their very delicate balance, and they can't quite see that saving time upstream will translate into more time that they can spend either going home and being with their families and enjoying a quality of life and not burning out, or spending more time with patients. And it also tends to cut down on medical errors and mistakes that happen during handoffs, during transitions. I can't tell you how many times patients go from one facility to another and their medications are wrong. And it takes a while before everyone sorts out that, wow, they're on the wrong meds.
Right. Right. And, it's interesting. You talk about not wanting to be disruptive.
Right.
But that's what you're being. You are being disruptive. You are breaking down the barriers. You're
right.
You're disrupting the way operationally healthcare is being delivered by creating this.
With the ultimate goal that if doctors can go back to being doctors, they will take better care of patients.
Right.
The ultimate recipient of the benefit is the patient and the population.
Minimize the errors and have knowledge. And have that at your fingertips. I can tell you this, and we talked about this the other day. I'm on the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging. Governor Ducey appointed me there 2 years ago. And I will tell you, 4 years ago, less than 20% of the hospitals and healthcare systems communicated with their EMRs. And now it's over 60. I mean, we're making progress. We're not there yet.
Yep.
But it's a slow process.
It is. And adoption is slow and just it's a slow roll. But I truly believe that we have an opportunity. There is a lot of data out there. Unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't talk to each other, but there is an opportunity to collect data, which ultimately will filter back and help the delivery of healthcare, help us make better decisions, help us reduce medical errors. And that's kind of what Hybrid Chart was all about. It started as a rounding tool. It started as a collaboration tool to give to the doctors so they can manage this sort of overwhelming task of trying to round on patients at all different facilities that are from different, some here in town, some might be Honor Health, some might be Banner, some might be Dignity. They're not always the same, so they definitely don't talk to each other. And it was an opportunity for them to capture their bills and their charges properly and filter them back. So that, from a financial side, it makes doctor practices a little bit more cost effective.
Sure.
That's how it started.
Software acting as a service, so SaaS.
Right.
Talk to me just so that our listening audience can really understand, what does Hybrid Chart really look like in its form with a physician? You're able to use your devices, or using tablets, or using computers, or all the above? All
the above. So, years ago, if you wanted to bring in software, it meant that you had to buy your own servers. You had to hire staff to run these servers. Originally, people were putting them in the closet, and then once after they had one water main break and ruin all their data, they said, wow, maybe a data center is a great idea. So, things migrated to data centers and then the cloud and all that. So the SaaS model really means that you're not buying equipment. We're hosting everything for you. It's all hosted in the cloud. You're using either your smartphone or a tablet or a desktop to be able to access the system. You don't own any servers. You don't have to load any software into your own environment. It's all being delivered to you. And look, we wanted to create a model that was very easy for doctors. So we didn't want to put in a lot of barriers to entry. So we have very nice pricing and nice subscription models that don't require long-term contracts, things like that.
So if you were doing rounds, and let's say you were right down the street here at Honor Health Shea Campus.
Yep.
You'd go in there with your device.
Right.
And go in there, you go visit your patient, and I would imagine you would log on to your device via a icon.
Well, it's an app that's installed on
Right.
your phone. Right. And so, I'm using Honor Health's electronic record that's at their, installed in their hospital to get patient vitals, patient labs, look at notes from other doctors, put in my own notes. But remember, no one in that building works for me. So if I want to submit a charge, my billers actually don't even live in this state. So how am I going to get that information to them?
Right.
Plus, my partners and I need to collaborate. I mean, we're going into a weekend now, right? And so whoever's rounding today may not necessarily be on call for the weekend. And so how am I going to convey to them which patients they need to see? Am I going to call them? That's an hour conversation.
Right.
Am I going to fax it to them? You better not, because that's not compliant with all the privacy laws. Am I going to create a spreadsheet and email to them? That's a good way to get fined. So I'm not going to do any of that stuff. And remember, text messages, not secure. Pagers, believe it or not secure. So, built into the HybridChart tool is a secure communication tool that allows doctors to talk back and forth. Plus, because this is a cloud-based census list of patients, all separated by their hospitals, it's easy for anyone in that organization to log on, pull up their phone. They can see what patients need to be seen. And if I update the list, everybody else can see what's going on.
That is so cool, and especially when you sit there and talk about billers. So I would imagine there's a lot of intuitiveness to this, because most SaaSes are that way.
Yeah.
And that you probably open up your device and you hit a certain code in terms of what you were there to see. That goes to your office and to the billing office, and they're able to bill the health insurance companies accordingly.
Yeah. So, remember, back to our original point, I straddle the fence between being a practicing physician and being a software developer. So I wrote all the code for HybridChart. And so, if you put a bunch of developers, thank you.
That is so wild.
If you put a lot of a pile of developers into a room and say, make some medical software, what comes out is going to work. But then you hand it to a doctor and they look at it and they go, yeah, this is not really right. This is not, you don't really understand our world. And so, I'm a practicing doctor. I know what needs to be done. I know what's clunky, what's not clunky, what the very subtle nuances in there.
Oh, I love that. And it really does take somebody with your experience and knowledge to be able to make it user-friendly for the physician to be able to use that software.
Yeah, I mean, our training is funny. It's most doctors usually start the training for 10 minutes and then they go, I got it. Leave me alone. I got this already.
Fantastic. Well, as you can hear, we got the doors taking us out. It's hard to believe it's halftime here. I told you, Greg,
fast.
it goes by really, really fast.
You weren't kidding.
You're listening to Health Futures. I've got Dr. Greg Sanders from HybridChart, and we're talking about some really fascinating technology and innovation that he has created right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Stick around. We'll be right back. This is segment number 2. We're down. We got 2 more to go.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. We're on our 3rd segment here, and if you're just tuning in, I got Dr. Greg Sanders here in the studio. He's a cardiologist and the founder and CEO of a company called HybridChart. And Greg, it's so good to have you here. We've covered a lot of material in the first 2 segments. I just want to tell our listening audience, I'm here on your website, hybridchart.com. Really cool.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Let us help you. Just really, really good information to learn more about this company. So please feel free to go to hybridchart.com or call 877-977-5544. Ask for Stacy Schaefer, and you will get more information about HybridChart. So,
Thank you.
So I want to get down to really the future of where this thing is going. And, we hear about population health, and, this innovation that you've created really helps to make that statement really work. I mean, because a lot of people don't know what population health is. Maybe take us through what population health is, and then talk to us about where you see HybridChart going.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so population health management takes a lot of different forms. Right now, the way most people are looking at it is it's divided by disease. So let's say you have diabetes. We know that diabetics need certain things, and there are certain metrics or benchmarks you want to hit with a diabetic. You want to make sure you're checking their feet. You want to make sure you're checking their hemoglobin A1C. I mean, there's medications you have to be aware of. And so, especially since we're moving away from a fee-for-service type of medical model,
right,
and we're moving more towards, pay for performance.
Some call it value-based. Value-based outcomes or value-based services.
Absolutely. So then the question becomes, well, how do you tell what's good value and what's not good value?
Right.
What are the standards and who's falling below the standards and who's not? And so, but the goal of all this is to be able to feed all of this data about diabetics, and it's not just in the hospital. It's in the outpatient setting. It's when they do go to the hospital. It's when they go to rehab. It's that whole life cycle of the patient. And then you want to know as a whole, how well are you taking care of this population of diabetic patients? And what percentage of them are getting their hemoglobin A1C checked? And why are they not? And how do you make that better? So it's a continuous loop where you want to gather the data, you want to analyze the data against a model, and then you want to feed suggestions back into the system on how to improve compliance so that your value goes up. When value goes up, patient outcomes get better.
Right.
So that's kind of the model that we're trying to go towards. The big challenge is, where does the data come from? And some of the most valuable data is trapped in the doctor's head, and it's stuck there. It's not that doctors don't want to give you the data. They don't have time. Doctors' worlds have changed over the last 15 years. They've become a lot of the changes that have had to happen for data gathering and data and data documentation have fallen on the shoulders of the doctor.
They don't have time.
They don't. They spend more time documenting than they do actually seeing the patient.
Exactly.
And the stress on that doctor has gotten to the point where if you go to them and say, okay, we have this great project, we really want to help diabetics, we need you to help us collect data, and their polite answer, I'm giving you the polite answer, is no, I can't fill out another form, I don't have any time. I've got to take care of the actual human being in front of me.
Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah, sure.
So I've got a friend of mine who's
it's your show, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I've got a friend of mine who's been a practicing physician, family doc, for 35 years. And I will tell you that about 6 months ago, I think he called me. I mean, he was so depressed. Yeah. And I think that's the best word to use. He was burnt out, physician burnout. He is working harder now than he's ever worked and making not even close to the amount of money he used to make.
Right.
And was ready to really throw in the towel. And, he sold his practice probably about a half a dozen years ago to a bigger entity. And he was the number one producing doc in that entity. And they have hundreds of doctors. I mean, he was seeing the most patients. And there's two things he did to be able to be practicing still and have his sanity.
Yeah.
One, he was able to get an extra day off. So he takes Wednesdays off now, never used to. And two, he got a scribe. Right. He got a scribe because he just couldn't do it all. And I mean, I know that is more of a Band-Aid over the situation, but I also know that HybridChart could be his friend if he knew a little bit about HybridChart.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, physician burnout is such a prevalent thing for your listeners who don't understand. Remember, it's a very rigorous training to get to the point where you're a practicing physician with your shingle out on the outside, and it's a huge time investment. It's a lot of delayed gratification, but pretty much every doctor out there is there because they want to take care of patients. And now there's so many roadblocks to being able to actually just take care of the patient. Most doctors are spending 20 to 30% of their time doing patient care. The rest of it is all clerical work, documentation.
Crazy.
And
you talk about, what it takes to be an expert, 10,000 hours. Guys like yourself, when you got into med school and then went for your, fellowship and your specialization in cardiology, by the time you were practicing, you probably already had 10,000 hours in.
Oh, for sure. And medicine's sort of a train on the job kind of thing. I mean, you do med school where the first couple of years are in this classroom. The rest of it, you're training on the job.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go back to talking about HybridChart, talking about the data, the mounds of data that you are collecting, and where are we going to go with this?
So we recognized when we first built HybridChart, we built it as I said, as a collaboration tool, as a tool that does charge capture, which is what we call collecting your bills on the patients and transferring them seamlessly into whatever software system your billers are using. We talked about secure communication. We built in a few other features in there. One of them is a discharge management tool. So what we recognized is there's a very big disconnection between the inpatient world, outpatient world. Patient leaves the hospital, and it's kind of up to them to make their follow-up appointment. They're discharged with a big stack of paper. Somewhere buried in there is, oh yeah, by the way, follow up with Dr. Sanders in a week or 3 weeks. Now,
and their pharmacy orders in there and some other things in there too.
There's all sorts of stuff. And a lot of these patients, unfortunately, go home and their first thing they do is not rifle through that pile and get on the phone. And so, especially if this is a higher risk patient, or patient that's more likely to be readmitted very soon on after their discharge, then we basically place the onus on the patient to make their follow-up appointments, and they get lost. They slip through the cracks, or by the time they get around to it, they've already redeveloped whatever condition they were discharged with, and they're back in the ER.
That's part of the reason why they should go home with HomeCare. So we can help them with that. And we talk about it on our show. Yeah. 1/3 of our population, 65 and older, is living alone. And I'm not living alone, but I'm proof positive. Greg, I had orthoscopic knee surgery almost 2 years ago. And I got my discharge packet. Yeah. And I came home, I threw it on the kitchen island, and I went back to my bedroom, got ice and elevated my knee, and woke up the next day and finally opened up the packet, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Right.
I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that. It's very easy to happen.
Right. So when you put it in the hands of the doctor, imagine this scenario. So I'm the rounding doctor. I come in and see you. I'm standing at your bedside. I pull up HybridChart on my app, on my phone. 3 taps, you have an appointment in my office already. I've seen scenarios where I'm still standing in the room, patients in the blue gown with the IV in their hand, and the phone rings in their room. It's my office calling to tell them that they have the appointment. I haven't even left the room yet.
That's incredible.
But that's connecting the inpatient to the outpatient worlds, because there is no connection right now, and patients are the ones who are suffering. I mean, assuring that patient has a follow-up, and let's say home health has already been arranged. I'll throw the home health in there. That's your opportunity to introduce a home health consult and get them teed up to be in the patient's home. It's when you're standing right there.
And the interesting thing too, and just coming full circle, it gives you the opportunity as the physician to spend time with the patient, not charting, not making that phone call yourself. Hey, I want this patient to be seen next week.
Right.
You have more time, interface time, which is what you want, and that's what the patient wants.
Absolutely.
It's the ultimate win-win.
Right.
It's hard to believe that we're almost down 3 segments. So we got one more segment to go. Tell me, how would you like to close? What do you want to close with?
I really would like to talk about the data acquisition. We've talked so far about how population health needs data and how it's trapped in the doctor's head, and the doctors are burned out and they don't have time. And I want to talk to you about how HybridChart has solved that problem of getting the data in the doctor's head.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So stick around. You don't want to miss this very final segment of my interview here with HybridChart's Greg Sanders, founder and CEO, and happens to be a cardiologist. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. And if you're just tuning in, I have got Dr. Greg Sanders. He is the founder and CEO of HybridChart. On his spare time, he's a cardiologist, too. That really is his full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
But he's got this incredible company that we have been talking about for literally the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and learning all kinds of great things about the wonderful things that you are doing, innovatively wise.
Thank you.
And, I want to pick up where we teed this segment up on the third, as we concluded the third segment, talking about data acquisition. We've talked about that ever since we started our talking about what HybridChart is, but take me all the way through now, data acquisition, and what does that mean with HybridChart?
Right. So just to recap, we talked about population health and how there is a need for data. The fact that the data is trapped inside the doctor's head and that they can't give it to you as readily as you want them to because they're too stressed, they're too taxed, they have just too much to do. So we recognized at HybridChart that step one was build a tool that they'll actually use. So if you build these great tools and the doctors don't use them, you've wasted your time. So on the surface, we solve their workflow problems. We solve all their pain points. We hand them this tool. It really does solve their workflow and make them efficient. But they still don't have the time to give you the data that you need to help population health management. And so we developed HybridChart, a feature called Pathways. And what Pathways does is it basically extracts data automatically in real time based on the doctor's behaviors. And it's very easy using the tool to pivot. Because remember, the government changes what they want and new things come out.
All the time.
All the time. So you can't turn to a development team and say, hey, we want to measure this now. You can do it yourself and you can set up a pathway in under 5 minutes. So you basically have handed the doctor a tool they like that they use and that makes them more efficient. At the same time, you're getting a real-time data feed of meaningful data that you've already predetermined you want based upon certain conditions. And then that data can be given to whatever analytic engine you want to give it to. This to me is an opportunity to get inside the doctor's head without burdening them with all of the extra time and efforts it's going to take for them to physically give you this information that you're wanting. And I think that's kind of, if we're going to succeed with population health, if we are going to be able to prove your worth in a value-based model, how are you going to do that? Just to get paid, it's going to take you more time and effort again just to prove that you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. So this, again, is an opportunity for the population to be able to benefit from data that's in the doctor's head that's not always the same data you get from an EHR. It's also an opportunity for the doctor to be able to track their own value of care that they're delivering without having to hire a scribe or hire another person to do all that data collection and analytics for them, because that's expensive.
And that's why I was sharing my friend's story. I mean, he just put a Band-Aid over it by hiring a scribe.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting. And if you missed our third or second or even first segment, you can catch them up on CypressHomeCare.com. Click on the media button, drop down to the radio show, and you'll catch the first 3 segments of my interview here with Dr. Greg Sanders. So, one of the things I wanted to just share with our listening audience here, you talk about value-based care. And basically, we have moved as an industry, the healthcare industry, to pay for outcomes, positive outcomes. So in our earlier segments, we talked about the fee-for-service model and its evolution really moving now to value-based. And in order to be value-based, you need data.
Right.
You need information. And you've got it.
We do. And the other question becomes, who do you want to collect that data for you? Do you really want the insurance company to collect the data for you and tell you what kind of value you're providing? Remember, they're the ones that don't want to pay you in the first place. So that's probably not a great idea.
And they don't want to approve whatever you're recommending for your patient because they'll usually deny it.
Right. And I'm not saying that the insurance companies are going to in a devious way going to do that, but their motivation is not necessarily to make sure that you're capturing every little thing that proves your value that you're delivering.
Right. No, absolutely. I think you've created something here that is really needed, and it's, to me, it's fascinating when I see physicians really step outside the box and say, okay, we can make this better. And you and I have talked about a couple physicians that both of us know very well. One was Dr. Alan Roga, who was the creator of a concept where it was recently sold to Teladoc, but it was called StatDoc. And the cool thing about what he created was a portal for somebody to visit with a physician. And he just got tired of working in an ER and having people use the emergency room as their doctor's office.
Right.
And that was the genesis of his innovation. And here, I'm just comparing him to you, and you are sitting here saying, we need to make our jobs more efficient. I need to spend more time with my patient, less time documenting, and being able to get real data, real analytical data, so we can make intelligent decisions.
What Alan did, and I think what I'm trying to do, is if you look at the root of a lot of doctor burnout, it is in the fact that corporate America has come in and dictated the workflow for doctors, and they've taken over, and they don't understand medicine at all.
Right.
And so the frustration that comes where all of a sudden from above magically appears, oh, guess what? Now you need to do this, 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 and you have to use this tool. And by the way, it's horrible, and it doesn't mirror your world at all. And not having that happen to you is what leads to a lot of the physician burnout. And I think what Alan's done, what Eric Greenman has done with iTel, or what other physician innovators have done, is they've tried to change their world, not letting corporate America do it, but do it right. Do it the way doctors need it done. And then you've taken over the control again, and the doctor burnout starts to subside a little bit.
Well, what's interesting is those two doctors who I happen to know, and they're very fine doctors, and they've done very well in their own right. They didn't write the computer code like you did.
Yeah, no.
That's pretty special, Greg. That says a lot about who you are, and
thank you.
And certainly making it more user friendly for the physician. We've got about 30 seconds. They can reach you by going to hybridchart.com, 877-977-5544. You have anything you want to close with?
I just really want to thank you for this opportunity. I think that doctors are looking for things that will help, but they're very gun shy. They're very apprehensive. They've been inundated with bad software solutions handed down to them, and so they are very apprehensive about trying new things. And I really hope that some doctors out there will hear this and will try to improve their workflow.
Fantastic. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
We've got the Duel in the Desert tomorrow, the Territorial Cup. Neither of us have a horse in the race, but Wes does. You can tell he's wearing the ASU garb, the hat, the shirt. Go ASU, right? They can do it.
Go ASU.
I just want a great game.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Greg, thank you for being on the show. I've learned a great deal. I know our listening audience has learned a great deal. If they want to learn more, go to hybridchart.com.
Thank you, Bob.
Make it a great day. Have a great weekend.
You
and
too.
We'll be back next Friday.
Thank you.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress HomeCare Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit CypressHomeCare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.